So somehow 2023 is already over. Genuinely feels like time is moving way too fast to keep up with, but hey, at least it was a good year for movies. So that's something. Now that we're a couple years removed from the pandemic era, it feels like we have somewhat of an idea of where the medium is headed. And sure, while there's plenty of things to feel nihilistic about, I think generally speaking, there's also plenty of things to feel optimistic about. This year we saw the return of some legendary filmmakers and the rise of some new voices. And although the franchise and IP films are still going strong, I think audiences are starting to value originality more. I don't know, maybe I'm being too hopeful, but I think the pendulum is beginning to swing the other way. Anyway, before I recap my top 20 films of the year, I do want to preface this list by saying that I haven't seen every 2023 release, so if a film that you love is missing from this list, it might just be because I didn't watch it. Or maybe I just didn't love it as much as you did. Also, this list is subject to change. Once I've caught up on the titles that I missed, it's likely this list will look a little bit different, and the ranking isn't set in stone. When I rewatch some of these films, I'll probably go back to the list and rearrange it a bit. I'll explain at the end of the video how it'll be updated, but for now, this is what I got. I also won't be spoiling anything here, so you don't have to worry about that if I speak on a film you haven't seen. Starting with a few honorable mentions that didn't quite crack the top 20, but are worth noting. Bottoms and Wonka, both a fun time, but for very different reasons. I enjoyed them nonetheless. Godzilla Minus One, a faithful adaptation of the classic kaiju. It had some amazing moments and amazing visual effects. Saltburn, a film that I'm still not entirely sure how to feel about. It was definitely a fun watch, but I also think it falls flat in certain areas. Barry Keoghan is a strange man. And last of the honorable mentions is John Wick 4, which I thoroughly enjoyed, because it's kind of hard not to when Keanu Reeves is beating the shit out of people for nearly 3 hours. At one point this film was on the list, but I think after some thought, this might be my least favorite John Wick. I'm not 100% sure on that, but it does feel longer than it needs to be. So with all of that out of the way, now for the actual list. I know this one will probably be absent on a lot of people's lists, but I got a lot of enjoyment out of Ridley Scott's Napoleon. As I mentioned in my review of the film, there are some breathtaking set pieces and amazing battle sequences that really worked for me. I think Phoenix and Kirby were both great in the lead roles, playing off each other well, and striking that comedic undertone of the film. Of course, it's far from perfect, but despite its shortcomings, I was able to get through this one relatively unscathed by the runtime. I'm curious to see if the longer cut will be an improvement. Hayao Miyazaki's swan song, or so I thought. Apparently he's already working on his next film, but The Boy and the Heron is definitely one that could move up the list once I rewatch it. It's a beautifully animated film that takes a reflective look at legacy and artifice. You really can't go wrong with Miyazaki. The Holdovers is the ideal Christmas movie. It's cozy, it's jolly, and it's draped in melancholy. Some really great performances here, and Alexander Payne does a terrific job of capturing the 70s vibe with the film emulation and zoom lenses. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is one of the best MCU films to date, and it has some of the best CGI to come out of this franchise. I think James Gunn was unfortunately held back by the direction the Russo brothers went with Gamora, but aside from that, this was a blast. Great soundtrack as always. Theater Camp is a genuinely hilarious mockumentary, and it has one of the best original songs of the year. I feel like this one has been slightly overlooked, so give it a shot if you haven't seen it. Molly Gordon and the rest of the cast killed it. If you're a theater kid, this one is probably for you. Priscilla is ambiguous and uncomfortable. Sofia Coppola does what she does best, creating a contemplative and meandering film that asks the audience to sit and linger on the subject matter. The film doesn't hold your hand or take any explicit moral stance. This quickly became one of my favorite films from Sofia Coppola. I know this one will be a lot of people's number one of the year. It's certainly an important film for the industry as a whole, signaling to studios that films like these can reach a wide audience and hold public consciousness for a prolonged period. There are many great aspects of this film, but I also believe that it has its blemishes. As brilliant as Göransson's score may be, it is a bit overused throughout the film, and along with the speedy editing that rarely gives the audience room to breathe, it makes the film's important moments feel less significant. It felt like there was a missed opportunity to have a tighter focus on a single aspect of the Oppenheimer story, rather than trying to cover too many bases at once. Nolan is definitely stepping outside his usual comfort zone with this one, making more of a character piece this time around. I think this led to some reluctance from him, not centering Oppenheimer's conflict more internally. Regardless, Cillian Murphy has one of the best performances of the year that allowed us to understand his character on a deeper level, and the film covers a fascinating story that necessarily maintained my intrigue. The film has a solid skeleton and foundation, also Hoytema's cinematography. Barbie is a tough one. On one hand, it's a fun time, and on the other, it sort of misses the mark thematically. Similar to Oppenheimer, it feels somewhat skin deep in its approach to the subject matter. I think Greta Gerwig has already covered her most topically poignant feminist perspective with her other films, leaving this entry to feel somewhat banal in comparison. It also is necessarily held back by Mattel. Roy Deschanel has a pretty good video addressing the problems with Barbie that I think is worth checking out for a more researched opinion. Nevertheless, it's still here at 13 because it's really well paced and genuinely funny, with one of Ryan Gosling's best roles to date. I still greatly appreciate the phenomenon that was Barbenheimer, but ultimately these two films could have been greater than they were, and that's why they aren't higher. I do like that one Billie Eilish song though. For a while, it felt like animation had stylistically stagnated, but then the Spider-Verse movies came out. Across the Spider-Verse is a worthy follow-up to one of the most beloved animated films in recent decades. The visuals are even more insane than before, with shifting frame rates and vibrant colors. It's a film that maintains the charm and appeal of Spider-Man as a character, the relatability and angst. It's a brilliant setup for what's to come, and I can't wait for the third installment. Not much to say that hasn't already been said. I love the Mission Impossible movies. It's one franchise that has remained relatively consistent, and although Tom Cruise does have his haters, I've always been a fan. The fact that he's doing this shit at 60 years old is insane, and this is yet another pure blockbuster entry into the series. Generally, you know what you're gonna get with these films, and unsurprisingly, Christopher McQuarrie delivers again. I don't think it's as good as Fallout, it's not as riveting, but the stunts and car chases are all there, the homage to the Buster Keaton era of filmmaking is there, and like Tom Cruise, it hasn't gotten old yet. I'm excited to see how they conclude things. Talk to Me is directed by Michael and Danny Filippo, two brothers who got their start on YouTube. I was familiar with their channel before, and they've always been a really creative duo that clearly puts all their heart into everything they do, and in the case of Talk to Me, this film is no exception. It's one of the best horror films in recent years. Although it might not be a scary enough film to keep you up at night, the real strength is in its concept and succinct storytelling. They managed to craft a wholly original script with characters you can root for and a plot that keeps you on edge. Pair this with a brilliant lead performance from Sophie Wilde and you get something truly refreshing in today's horror climate. I absolutely loved the ending of this film and I can't wait to see what they do with the sequel. I'm super happy for these guys, and it's at the very least inspiring to see a quality film made by YouTubers for once. Justine Triet puts together an enthralling mystery that makes use of classic motifs but also feels contemporary and fresh. It feels somewhat tacky to use the word subversive nowadays, but I do feel like in this era of independent filmmaking, there is an active effort to show audiences something they haven't seen before. And I think Anatomy of a Fall does a good job of playing on our expectations. Never at any point did it feel like I knew exactly where the film wanted to go. It has a script that keeps you on your toes and doesn't constrain itself to simply being a whodunit. There is a strong thematic focus on relationships and the compromise that is entailed with them, and on top of all of that, Sandra Hüller is phenomenal as the lead, playing a complex character who is intelligent but imperfect. I think she'll be in strong conversation for Best Actress. The only reason this film isn't a bit higher on the list is because it does feel a little longer than it needed to be, and I do feel a bit mixed on some of the cinematography. My last video was a review of this film and my opinion hasn't changed. I think this one has the best cinematography of the year, and it is also the funniest film of the year. Emma Stone makes the case for Best Actress as well, and Lanthimos once again proves why he's one of the most intriguing filmmakers of the 21st century. The music is brilliant, the set design is brilliant, there's so much to love about this film. As an exploration of sexual liberation, it's nuanced, exposing hypocrisies but taking a critical look at the inverse. As a viewing experience, it hits all the aesthetic marks with a wonderfully unique stylistic backbone. It's just so weird, chocked full of off-kilter characters and dialogue set in a vibrant surrealist Victorian setting. I think Poor Things will be a film with true staying power in the future, and as more people get to see it in the new year, there will be conversation around it for a while. I know this movie wasn't for everyone. As a fan of David Fincher, I loved this subtly satirical self-parody that didn't take itself too seriously. To me, The Killer is a purely entertaining film that guarantees a visually immersive experience unique to Fincher. Technically speaking, the cinematography and sound design is masterful, so at the very least, there's that. Michael Fassbender is great in essentially everything, so you know he's gonna nail the cold nihilism that the role asks of him. Sure, it could have been a tad shorter, but this was a good time. I have a full review on this one that you can check out when you finish this video. Blackberry is the most underappreciated film that I saw this year. The story of the rise and fall is fascinating. This film is inspiring, demoralizing, and hilarious all at the same time. Matt Johnson is brilliant both behind and in front of the camera here. This could have been a completely by-the-books film that hits the expected bullet points, but it goes well beyond that. It's more of a cautionary tale. I hate to compare it to The Social Network, but this is probably the closest thing that's come to scratching that itch for me, but unlike that film, it has more documentary style cinematography with the zooms and unstable camera. Where something like that doesn't always work for me, it feels perfectly complementary with Blackberry's style and pacing. And while the whole cast is doing a great job, the biggest standout is Glenn Howerton, who plays this irate and overly motivated dude with the utmost energy. Is it over the top? Maybe a little bit, but it works so well and he's giving it his all every second he's on screen. I would love to see a Best Actor nomination for him, but I don't know how realistic that is considering how quiet people have been about this one, so please give this film a shot if you haven't already seen it. Martin Scorsese is a guy who needs no introduction, and once again he delivers a deeply compact film full of ideas to ruminate on. As I said in my review, I don't think this film is as effectively executed as it could have been, but I say that relative to what I know Scorsese is capable of. Not to say that he phoned it in, but that he took the film in a direction that felt slightly tangential, but that's really the only negative thing I have to say. I think this film's importance plays a significant role in its high placement on my
list, but also because of the fact that it has some of the most chilling cinematic moments of 2023. Lily Gladstone is a real standout here, with a performance that feels reserved on the surface but is always seeped in this pent-up rage that she communicates so effectively. Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio are also great as you'd expect, and overall, despite its intimidating runtime, it feels relatively succinct and justified. This is the debut feature from Celine Song, and it is something truly special. What makes Past Lives so great is its rawness. This film, being a drama romance of sorts, could have easily felt cheap and unintentionally melodramatic, but it avoids this by staying honest. Greta Lee, Teo Yoo, and John Magaro are all amazing in their roles. Each character is played with nuance and subtlety. It feels almost too authentic. You can feel whenever one of them is holding back an emotion by catching it slip with how they hold their posture or communicate it with their eyes. It's a fantastic original screenplay that is coming from a genuine place. I have a short video on this film centered around the character of Arthur that you can check out, but yeah, because of my Canadian bias, I had to include Past Lives and Blackberry on this list. I don't want to give too much away about this film. Jonathan Glazer is one of the best directors of his time, and he's only made 4 films over the past 23 years. If you've seen Under the Skin, you'll have a good idea of what to expect with the zone of interest. It's patient and full of figurative empty spaces that force you to ponder what is happening on and off screen. This film makes use of some of the best sound design I have ever witnessed, telling most of the script's subtext through what the audience hears faintly in the background. It's about the Holocaust, which as an event has no shortage of depictions in media, but Glazer approaches it in such a way that has never been done. He makes the utmost use of perspective. It is his primary narrative tool, and it is done masterfully. I urge you to see this in theaters if you can, because it's quite an experience. Mind you, I know this one won't be for everyone. There isn't a very active plot or strong emphasis on characterization, but that's to the film's benefit, as it's not the main focus. May-December has the best performances of the year. Julianne Moore and Natalie Portman are unsurprisingly great, but Charles Melton in particular is my current pick to win Best Supporting Actor, as he just completely embodies the character of Joe. This was the first time I had seen a performance from him, and I was completely blown away by how effectively he made me care about his character's plight. One of the most fascinating aspects of this film is Todd Haynes' ability to balance the comedic elements and the tragic elements. The subject matter is murky, but the presentation is inviting, allowing us as the audience to get completely wrapped up in the story and its characters. The intentional melodrama assists the film in hammering home its thesis about sensationalism and the slippery ethics of art that exploits. It's perfectly paced from beginning to end, and it is one of Todd Haynes' most emotionally effective entries. This is also the first feature screenplay from Sammy Birch, who, if I hadn't known any better, I would have assumed was a seasoned writer with decades of experience. If you're subscribed to me, there's a solid chance it was from my Asteroid City video, and my opinion is unchanged. I still think this is Wes Anderson's best film. I'm sure this is where a lot of people will disagree with me, but this was my favorite of the year. It's one of those that just hit me at the right time. There's so much that he's touching on in this film that just managed to resonate with me, and I understand that's not going to be the case for everyone. The existentialist concerns at the forefront of the film are shrouded in this colorful 50s pastiche, and it works perfectly. And then of course there's all the typical landmarks of a Wes Anderson film with the signature deadpan performances, meticulous camera work, blocking, and symmetry. I've heard some people call the soundtrack annoying, but I completely disagree. I loved it, and I especially love the Dear Alien dance number. Never thought I'd be defending Wes Anderson, but seeing this film appear on some worst of 2023 lists has made me go mad.
So that's the list, and it's entirely subjective. I don't believe these are definitively the best films of the year. In fact, it was quite difficult compiling this list because there's some films that are really hard to put above others, and it's really tough deciding which I love more than the other. And I'd love to know, what were your favorite films of the year? You could give me 5, you could give me 10, feel free to sound off in the comments. And as for how I'm gonna be updating this list, it's gonna be through Letterboxd. So you can click the link in the top of the description to see the most recently updated version of this list, where I might rearrange some films, or some might be added once I catch up on previous films that I missed. And on top of that, the list is going to contain every 2023 release that I've seen. So there'll be a lot more than 20 movies there, which also means my least favorite films of the year will be at the bottom of the list. So yeah, 2023 was a pretty solid year for movies. I think it was pretty on par with 2022, a year that was also great. And if you're curious, I have a list for the 2022 films, and I have other lists on my Letterboxd if you want to follow me there. And of course, there's other platforms you can follow me on linked in the description. My channel's been gaining some recent traction over the past few months, which is really cool. Recently hitting 4,000 subscribers, and into this new year, I want to stay active and keep making better videos. So since you made it to the end of the video, you might as well leave a like and you might as well subscribe. But yeah, thanks for watching.